called Covering Egypt, Media and Politics in the Post-Mubarak Period. Our second panel is titled The Media, Human Rights and Free Speech in Egypt. And I'm Karen Barkey, and I'm going to moderate. We have 4 speakers this morning that will be talking each about 20 minutes to the max. And I will keep time. Our 4th speaker just arrived in the nick of time. Thank you very much. I will introduce them, and then we will start our conversation. Okay. Our first speaker is Jamal Elshayyal, who is sitting right next to me. He's a correspondent at Al Jazeera English. He is a news producer for Al Jazeera English who joined the network in 2006 as one of the founding members of its specialized Middle East desk, later serving as the channel's Middle East editor. Our second speaker is Mohamed Elshamy, a freelance photojournalist. He's an Egyptian photojournalist who has been working in the field for 3 years. In 2011, at the age of 17, he became the youngest person ever to win an Egyptian press award. His work has appeared in Time, The Guardian, Bloomberg, Huffington Post, and many other places. Our third speaker is Sebastian Backhaus, a freelance journalist and photographer. He's a freelance photographer based in Berlin, though he spent several months a year in Cairo. His interests include the political process after Arab Spring, the Arabic language, and Egyptian humor. So we will go in this order, and I will give each speaker 20 minutes, and then we'll have a discussion and question discussion session. Thank you. Jamal Elshayyal first.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. The title of this session is State of Media, Human Rights and Free Speech in Egypt. I don't think really we need 20 minutes to discuss that. There is no media or freedom of speech or human rights in Egypt, really. And I say that pointing to quite a few facts. Just now as I begin to talk to 3 of my colleagues, Peter Greste, Mohamed, and Mohamed Fahmy, have been standing in, and I will use this term very loosely, a court in Egypt, accused of terrorism. The real reason why they are there is because they were doing their job as journalists, trying to portray and broadcast facts they see on the ground. Unfortunately, the state of Egypt, or the state Egypt is in right now, is not conducive to those who want to portray to the world the realities of what is going on there. The previous panel actually did a tremendous job in documenting and cataloging some of the more outrageous things that have taken place, not only since the coup of July 3rd, but in my view, what has been a premeditated, pre-planned, and precisely executed campaign to delegitimize not only anyone who has a different point of view, but essentially to delegitimize the idea of free thinking, the idea of freedom of speech and the idea of self-determination across the board in Egypt. Particularly, I'm convinced this began the evening of January 25th, 2011. Hours after thousands of people courageously took to the streets to try and get their voices heard, it became apparent that whilst the status quo in the Arab world's most populous nation was being challenged by a people who had suffered oppression and suppression for many decades, those who were the ones dishing out that oppression, those who were guilty of it, realized that it wasn't change that was needed in terms of policies that would give up this freedom, What was needed was a change of how to oppress these people. What was needed was a way to, or a change of how to ensure that those people remain enslaved to the wills of the minority and for the interests of a few. When it comes to the aspect of media in Egypt, there are some stark figures that I think we should stop at, particularly after the July 3rd coup. Since the July 3rd military coup, there are at least 6 journalists who have been killed. Amongst them, there is a British cameraman who had over 2 decades of experience, or 3 decades of experience for Sky News, not from Al Jazeera, not from an Egyptian press association. It is usually easy for the lazy-minded to try and pawn off as some sort of biased outlet, even though this is definitely not the case with regards to Al Jazeera, from a British establishment called Sky News. He was shot by a sniper, killed instantly. If this were to happen in any other country, if this was to happen under any other regime, let's say, for example, this was to take place in Saudi Arabia, for example, or if it was to take place in, not even, if we were to say it was to take place in any other European country, the outcry would have been different. It wasn't the case in Egypt, and this is, and I'm sure the next session will discuss this more when it comes to the international perspective to this, but don't be fooled in thinking that the oppression of the media in Egypt is something that is simply domestic. There are regional and international players behind this. So when you look at some of the channels of which Wael showed you some of the clips from, these are channels that are funded directly by countries like the United Arab Emirates. These are channels who have, or their owners have very strong links, like the founder of On TV, Naguib Sawiris, with Western countries, including this one here. So it is not a coincidence that these things take place. From a personal perspective, I've been covering Egypt for several years now. In fact, I arrived to Egypt on January 26th, 24 hours after the uprising, what we thought was to be a revolution, but ultimately was some sort of intifada or uprising, which never really saw the full fruition of what many of those who instigated it had aspired towards. And when I arrived, I remember seeing scenes, and I wrote an article that evening, that very same evening, entitled "The Egypt I Never Knew Existed." As someone who's originally Egyptian and who's traveled and lived in Egypt for many years, the scenes on the streets of Cairo that day came to as quite a surprise, at least in terms of face value when you look at it. Obviously, when the dust settles and you take into consideration all the different aspects that led up to that. During the uprising, I reported from Cairo, Suez, and Alexandria. I straight away, although I arrived on 26, I went straight to Suez. Suez was the more deadly of the cities in the early days of the revolution. It was where the first 3 people got killed, and where there was a lot of, because of also the nature of Suez, the history that it has, the people there are generally a bit more feisty, so to speak. There we were mobbed. There were minivans that were being driven around by what is now, I think, being co-opted into the English language, Baltagiya, or thugs, with banners that were, or essentially they were bedcloths, but were written on them, the words, "Whoever speaks to Al Jazeera, we will cut off their tongue," driving around the city. At one point, we had a very angry mob attack myself and my colleague at the time, and to the point where we were close to death. In Cairo, the day the infamous 14th century-like event of the Battle of the Camels took place in Tahrir, again, I was mobbed and attacked. And were it not for the chaos that took place, ensuing chaos, I probably would have died at that point, but thankfully the storming of Tahrir and so forth meant there was some sort of stampede and I managed to get away. In Alexandria, one of the more surreal situations took place where I had a 16-year-old boy put a machete to my neck. And the surreal nature of it led to me actually laughing, and I think the fact that I didn't take it that seriously, or maybe the kind of like automatic defense mechanism there, helped me get out of that situation. That was those days, those incidents weren't, at the time maybe we thought they were just sporadic, but they're not. They were things that were genuinely and very clearly orchestrated. They were the same types of people who had the same types of support from the police or from the military. They all were on the payroll of the Mubarak regime or members of the Mubarak regime. And that's why I say the idea to try and push back the wave of protests was concocted from the very moment that wave of protests began. And we saw it not only through the violence that was orchestrated against the journalists, but also through the statements made by people like Omar Suleiman, who had told Christiana Amanpour during his interview with her that the brother Muslimhood, as you called it, were the biggest danger, and how the people of Egypt were not ready for democracy. We saw it in the statements made by the then President Mubarak, who also essentially threatened that it was either himself or chaos. And that's why the chaos that ensued under people think that the military, the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, mismanaged that period. I genuinely believe they intended to. I don't think an institution with that amount of resources, that amount of money, that amount of essential boots on the ground is incapable of managing that period to such negative extents without there being a concerted effort. In the sense that when you look at all the things that took place, where the virginity tests or the storming of the Israeli embassy, I remember reporting on the storming of the Israeli embassy, and this was an event that was very clearly orchestrated by the security forces, putting up a very provocative wall near the embassy, and then the police bussing in thugs to start attacking that wall. There was no clear leadership from the revolutionary forces asking people to go to the embassy. There was no one thing that instigated it. If anything, actually, the proof is that when Israel actually did then attack Gaza under President Mohamed Morsi, there was no storming of the embassy then, which would have given much more reason for something like that to happen. The infamous case of Mohamed Mahmoud protests that took place at the time, it was just before the parliamentary elections. I had gone down to Tahrir to film a stand-up. There was a protest the day before. The families of the victims of the revolution and so forth, maybe a couple of dozen had remained. And we saw, and we filmed this, and hopefully these things will come out one day in a very clear way to hold people accountable to the infringements of human rights and the infringements on freedom of press. But we saw military soldiers come down, beat these people unprovoked, and then the police come and plant what was a very clear bait, which was an armored personnel carrier, parked it in Tahrir, got out, left it, and walked away. Within seconds, you saw armed men come and try and set it alight, and literally from that, and is my honest belief that that's how the Mohamed Mahmoud protest started, the beating of the protesters unprovoked, and then starting a fire that then continued. Now, the reason why I say, and I list some of these, and these aren't all the infringements, or these aren't all the crimes committed throughout, but the reason why there are many more, the reason why I list them is because there is a very clear chronology to how we've come about today. When you look at how there was a very clear attempt to demonize many things, but primarily three things post January 25th, in my view. And these three things, they're not connected ideologically or organizationally. They are connected because they served, to some extent, the idea of freedom in Egypt. Those three things are as follows. Tahrir Square as the symbol of the revolution. Demonizing Tahrir Square by concerted and very well organized mobs that went to molest women there, to harass women there, by planting it with drug dealers, by making it a place where people no longer wanted to go to protest, was number one. So you get away, you get rid of the symbol of the revolution, so to speak. Number two, to demonize the Muslim Brotherhood. Not necessarily because they are great people, not necessarily because they are bad people, just because they were the only organization that was capable to organize en masse, very simply. And the proof of that is that post-January 25th, whenever there was a protest day called, so Friday for this or Friday for that, any Friday that did not include the Muslim Brotherhood, Tahrir Square was barely half full. The only time you had it full was with the Muslim Brotherhood. So a very clear and concerted attempt to demonize them, and demonize them through things like Dr. Mohamed mentioned about the idea of necrophilia being something they were trying to instill in the constitution, or even from a revolutionary point of view, they sold out the revolution and Mohammed Mahmoud and so forth. And whilst, to be honest, the Muslim Brotherhood didn't do themselves any favor by allowing a lot of mistakes themselves. And the third thing that was and continues to be demonized, obviously, is Al Jazeera. Again, like I say, these three things aren't linked ideologically, but without these three things, you wouldn't have had an uprising. Al Jazeera was the only television channel that was broadcasting from Tahrir. It was the only international outlet that was giving the other voice when every other channel was either showing an empty bridge, like state TV, or cartoons whilst people were being killed, or it had those coming out on TV saying that Kentucky Fried Chicken was sponsoring the revolution and giving out free food, or that there was essentially Tahrir was one, as one famous actor put it, essentially one huge brothel. Now, when you look at some of these events which I've chronicled, and you look at them in the context that there was this attempt to demonize these three things, and you look at how we came about to the June 30th protest and the July 3rd coup. If you're still not convinced by it, I will give you a very simple example. Like I said, during the January 25th uprising, there were those who came on TV and they said the following. They said that free food was being given out by KFC and the people in Tahrir were there for free food. They said that many young people were fooled into going there and tricked into going there because there was drugs and essentially like orgies and sex parties taking place in Tahrir Square. They said that Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Israel, the United States all collaborated together in a one-of-a-kind, amazing United Nations-like agreement to bring down Mubarak, who was the savior of the Arab world, and as we know, obviously the most kind of patriotic pan-Arabist that the world has ever seen. No one believed it at the time, or many people didn't believe it at the time of June 2011. Fast forward to July 3rd, 2013, and this is what was said on TV. There are warheads in Rab' al-Adawiyya Square with there are missiles with chemical warheads in Rab' al-Adawiyya Square. Under the stage, there are dozens of bodies that are being hidden there. That people have gone there this time not to have orgies, but to have what is called jihad al-nikah, which is the jihad essentially where women give up themselves for the sake of God for those who are going to wage war. All of these things that were said, this time were actually believed. They were believed by a significant part, if not, to be honest, unfortunately, the majority of Egyptian people, because you had 3 years of demonizing the media and the free press to the extent where you negated the ability, or what little ability there was, because unfortunately the truth of the matter is after 60 years of military rule in Egypt, you have a high level of ignorance and illiteracy. So what little ability there was for free thinking had almost been eradicated. Now that those three things have been demonized to a very great extent, the attention is now being shifted to those who are I don't mean to be in a condescending way, but maybe lesser significant, but still have some significance. So the smaller groups like the April 6th movement, people like Amr Hamzawi, others who at the time were used in my view, in their naivety, as pawns to delegitimize the first three. Now the attention has been shifted to them. And that's why you see it even the recent letter by the founder of the April 6 movement, Ahmed Maher, where he says it was entitled, "Unfortunately, I knew all along." Unfortunately, I knew all along that there was a coup taking place and we were naive into not realizing, and now the attention has come to them. Does that mean that the future is bleak in terms of these three things, in terms of freedom of speech and media and human rights? I personally don't think so. I think when you look at through the suffering, particularly from a media perspective now, let me focus, and Mohamed will speak now of our colleague Abdullah Elshamy, who, there's only one word you can, or it's very difficult to describe someone like that, someone who has essentially been willing to take a hunger strike to the point of death, not only for his own freedom, but essentially for the freedom of all press, and not only for the freedom of all press in Egypt, but around the world. Someone who really does deserve the utmost respect from across the globe, because he has taken on single-handedly a military regime and all its allies, from the UAE to the West and so forth, with one goal in mind, that he will not give up until there is freedom, and freedom for him that would represent freedom for everyone. And I think in that there is hope. I think in that the more the crimes that are committed against the media, the more there are these phony trials where you have renowned journalists, award-winning journalists like Peter Greste or Bahr Mohamed or Mohamed Fahmy stand trial in front of a judge who lacks any sort of integrity whatsoever, that increases the resolve of people to ensure that this battle continues, to ensure that the freedom of speech and freedom of media continues. How we go about that, I'm sure we can discuss and find ways of the best way to ensure that those who have a responsibility towards supporting freedom in Egypt do so. But as difficult as this situation is, they always say in the darkest hour you see the light most clearly, and I think we are at that point right now. There's a video of Abdullah Elshamy. It is the last video we saw of him before he was moved, or right as he was moved to solitary confinement. Abdullah had the foresight to know, like I say, he is taking this battle on single-handedly against a regime which has no mercy. So this video was filmed in case anything were to happen to him. There's a minute and a half in Arabic, a minute and a half in English. We can play just the English one, and then Mohamed, I think, will speak. With his presentation, they show the difference between Abdullah prior to his hunger strike and now. So you can get an idea. Abdullah's lost more than 45 kilos and essentially is in a very dire situation. Despite this, just so you're aware, as Mohamed gets this ready, Al Jazeera has requested through lawyers and through many different international organizations, for one simple, aside from obviously demanding the release of these people, we asked for Abdullah to be transferred to a private hospital or to have independent medics come and see him. This has been rejected on several occasions, and it gives you an idea of just the disdain that the Egyptian authorities have towards anyone who is willing to try and report freely on what is taking place in Egypt.
Hi everyone. I am Mohamed, the younger brother of Abdullah Elshamy. I just want to start off by showing pictures of Abdullah before detention. And this is a picture of him in jail on the 15th of May. His appeal was refused by the Egyptian judge. This is a closer picture of him. And yesterday, an official Ministry of Interior Facebook page published these photos, which claim Abdullah isn't on hunger strike. And these pictures were shown after 10 days. 10 days ago, he was kidnapped from his cell in Tura prison to Al-Aqrab, which means scorpion. And it's a high security is a maximum security prison in Egypt. It's solitary confinement. And he was threatened to be moved to it if he doesn't break his hunger strike, claiming his hunger strike makes pressure on them. And if he doesn't break it, they will ban my family from visiting to him, or he will die in the cell and no one will even ask about him. So Abdullah is he's Al Jazeera Arabic English Al Jazeera Arabic correspondent in Nigeria. He graduated 2009 from 6 October University in Egypt, Mass Communication, BA. And since January 2012, I think, he started working with Al Jazeera. He was their correspondent in Nigeria. And he also covered the war in Libya. And he covered the conflict between the French army and the rebels in Mali, and few events in Africa. And last June, the channel asked Abdullah to go and cover the situation in Egypt because of the protests that were going to take place. And I think most media outlets did the same. The place I work for, they asked for 2 teams to come and as a backup, because the protest might be big, something might go wrong, so you will need more. So I think that's what happened. That's the reason Al Jazeera asked him to come to Egypt. He arrived on the 29th of June 2013, and he started covering from Tahrir Square, because the Egyptian authorities, they claim he's a Muslim Brotherhood, and he just came to cover the Rabia sitting. But he started covering Tahrir Square from the 30th of June to and 1st and 2nd of July, till the day Mohamed Morsi was overthrown by the Egyptian army. Abdullah was in Tahrir Square. Then they stormed the office he was, and they stole everything, all his papers, all his money, the security forces. So the plan was that he can't stay anymore. I think it wouldn't be safe for Al Jazeera or for any channel or media outlet who's against the military coup that took place on the 3rd of July. So he started from the 4th of July covering protests taking place. He also covered some protests that were supporting the military general Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, but most of the time he was covering Rabia al-Adawiyya Square. And on the 14th of August, the Egyptian authorities claimed that only 600 were killed. He was arrested the same day, and he was transferred to. Before this, he was like accused by the Egyptian police that he sold his country for money and for dollars and blah blah blah. The same thing we hear always. And then he was moved to 2 police stations, Madinat Masr and Al Shuruq. Then he was moved to Abu Zabal, which is on the outskirts of Cairo, and it was almost 120 kilometers from where we live. And he spent there 3 months. And for the 3 months, he was in charge. He didn't even go to the prosecutor, but every 15 days he got another 15 days extension of detention. And in the 2nd month, he got an automatic 45 days detention. So it's today, he gets the verdict in prison that today you have another 45 days in prison. And this is till today, even though the Egyptian law states that it's only 6 months to you either free a prisoner or you refer him to trial. Abdullah, like some people think he's in Al Jazeera English case, he's not. Abdullah is alone. He doesn't have a trial. There's no any charge against him. And it's 9 months and 8 days today, and there's no any charge against him or any trial taking place. Last January, he decided to protest his false detention, and he decided to start a hunger strike, which he started it by partly hunger strike, which means he ate date and water and milk and juice. till March, he decided to drop off taking dates and just rely on water and juice. So last April, on the 12th of April, police officers from Tora prison went to him and they threatened him that if you don't break your hunger strike, because this is the only thing that's doing noise for us, we're going to send you to a high security prison and no one will ever know where you are or your whereabouts. And he told them, I don't care, you can do whatever you want and I will continue in my way. This was the threatening way. 10 days later, the deputy of the Minister of Interior came to Abdullah and he told him, Egypt wants you, Egypt needs you. So Abdullah told him, Egypt needs me while I'm in jail. He told him, yeah, you will be out. And he tried to talk to him in a good way to persuade him to break his hunger strike. Then he started telling him, why are you doing a hunger strike? Do you know whoever did a hunger strike before? Abdullah told him, yes, I know people like Gandhi and Mandela. He told him, these people, they are non-believers. They are not Muslims. These people are going to hell anyways. So your high role now are non-Muslims. How dare you do this? And 10 days later, the same person decided Abdullah to be sent to Al-Aqrab, maximum security, solitary confinement. The same person who tried to be nice to him to persuade him to break the hunger strike. And we didn't know anything about Abdullah being moved. It was some people from the prison. They called us. They told them Abdullah was moved this morning, 6 a.m., and we don't know where he is. We asked about him in the prison hospital. He's not around. We went to other prisons. We don't know anything about him. For more than 4 days, we know nothing about Abdullah, where he is he dead or alive. He went to many hospitals, special and public hospitals. There was nothing about him. And then last week, my mom and Abdullah's wife, Gihad, who's also on a hunger strike, in support of Abdullah, they went to, they asked about him in Al-Aqrab prison, and the prison authorities told them he was around. And a few days ago, for the first time, my family decided to, they finally got the permit to visit Abdullah, because in this prison, it's not like the two ones. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that he was moved to Tora prison from Abu Zabal. Tora is in Maadi, it's in Cairo. Abu Zabal is in Al-Qalyubiyya, it's another state. It's not in Cairo. Al-Aqrab is not like the other ones. You don't go every 1 week and you don't go and wait for him 2 to 3 hours. In this new prison he is, you need to go get the ID cards of 2 to 3 people maximum, and you need to get a permit from the general prosecutor to meet him for 30 minutes only a week or 10 days, and it's behind glass, and you talk to him by telephone, and the telephone, there's a police officer beside you listening for everything you're saying. So the last visit of my mom and his wife, Abdullah tried to tell them, Abdullah told them that they force fed him. 5 people from the prison held him by force, and they made him eat tuna, which made him vomit 3 times, and he fainted. And when he fainted, the prison doctor, which one of the policemen described him to Abdullah, he told him that this doctor, we call him the butcher. We don't call him a doctor. He got iced water and he spilled it over Abdullah's body, and he left him on the ground after he fainted. The last visit, Abdullah tried to explain to my parents, but he couldn't say it honestly because of the people hearing everything he's saying, that he's under pressure, they're threatening him, and every now and then they either tell him we're gonna send you to a dungeon under the ground, and this visit you got is not gonna happen anymore. But we couldn't get many information from him because it's very hard. Yeah, also in the other prisons, we met him face to face in a big room, and there's other like 20 prisoners, but in this, it's just one room behind the glass, and the telephone is taped, so anything you're saying is heard. So when he said, I need to tell you something to my mom and my wife, and his wife, sorry, they then told him the visit is over. And they did not allow him to say what he wanted to say to my parents. And yesterday, a Facebook page, it's a non-official, it's an unofficial page. It's not the official one for the Ministry of Interior, showed these pictures and saying, so this is Abdullah Elshamy, the correspondent of Al Jazeera Arabic, who claims to be on hunger strike, eating. And they started making fun. Does eating mean just, does hunger strike for him mean just breakfast? Blah, blah, blah. I spoke to some prisoners who were freed, who were with Abdullah. They told him, like, there's a picture showing a trademark of milk, and this is not allowed for you to get in, because they try to take out everything of you. They don't allow you to bring this stuff to the prison, but they let you buy the ones the army and the police make. So they get the profit of the money. And in the prisons, they don't sell these kinds. So I myself, I'm not sure under which circumstances these pictures were taken of him eating. And Abdullah himself, he said he was under mental and physical pressure from the police officers, and all of them, they were against him. There wasn't even anyone trying to show him that he is with him. And I, as his brother, and this is my personal view, I think anything might have happened to him, because in a solitary confinement, you have no one with you. He might have been threatened. He might have been tortured by the police for something like this happening. And also, Abdullah's hunger strike, there is 7 official papers sent to the general prosecutor about it, and all the authorities in Egypt know it, but only the Ministry of Interior tries to deny it. Last week, the deputy of the prison authorities head told the Egyptian the Egyptian state agency called Middle East Agency that Abdullah's Elshamy health is excellent and he's not on hunger strike. The same day, the same afternoon, he said to an Egyptian newspaper called Al Masri Al-Yawm that he was on hunger strike, but he stopped it and he's now eating. Because for the last 3 months, they have been telling the media and the lawyers that he just refuses to take our food, the prison food, but he takes the food that his parents, he means us, we get to him. This is all I think I can say.
Hello. I have no idea how to continue after this story of Mohamed's brother, but I will try to do it. However, I bring you some. First of all, my English is not that good, so if it's getting strange, you're allowed to laugh, no problem. I will give my best, and if you don't understand what I try to transport, please feel free to ask me what I mean. And secondly, I'm not the stage and not the speech guy, so I bring some of my photos, which escort me to the next 20 minutes. Makes it a little bit more easier for me. So today I'm invited to speak about my experience by covering the events in the last year in Cairo as a photographer. I'm very happy to be invited. Thank you. So I'm Sebastian Backhaus, and from Germany. I'm a freelancer photographer with a focus on Egypt. How I said, I was working for the Vice magazine. Here it's me at the Tahrir Square for the Vice magazine, and now I'm working for the German German press agency DPR and the European magazine. You Western media only support the Islamists. Nobody of you is showing the millions of people demonstrating on the streets who are asking the army to rescue them from the Muslim Brotherhood. Sentence like this, that was often my happy welcome if I was in the Masbiro. This is a press center, a part of the Interior Ministry, where I have to ask for my accreditation, for my permit as a journalist. So they tried to influence me if I was there and asking for the accreditation. And they try to influence the way I'm publishing. And so it's a very strange situation to be there and asking for the permit to do your photographing job. And they say, yes, but please, this way and this way. But I also have to say it's always they give me this accreditation. I have to wait a long time, but they always give me. However, but if you, but they can control you as a journalist very easy. I think I'm speaking now in the role of a foreign photographer, so it's not comparing to the story of your brother. It's completely another story, but this is the only I can do. On the accreditation form, you have to mention where exactly you are planning to shoot, what exactly you are going to cover, which streets you will be there to make a photo. So if I take a picture where suddenly something, events are of interest are happening, and they are not written in the accreditation form, they can arrest me very, very easily. And so it's very easy to catch me if they like it. And they did it also. But let's go back to the time of Morsi, before the 3rd of July. In this time, I had no accreditation. I just was running around, put my pictures wherever I wanted to make my pictures, working for the Vice magazine, showing my European driver license if somebody was asking me for my press card. And this was working very easy, and there was no problem. I was mostly in all situations. This time, I was really free and was really welcome. My opportunities in this time was that the police that was my feeling, that the police was not very present or was not with the government. So they don't care about me and what I was doing there. Here we see a photo some days before the 3rd of July on the Tahrir Square, which show a little bit what I tried to explain. A policeman who is also changed the sides, going to the Morsi opponents, the anti-Morsi protesters. The so-called Black Bloc also, or other groups in this time, was running through the street, was attacking what they ever liked to attack, burning police cars. It was anarchistic feeling sometimes in Cairo. The Muslim Brotherhood was collecting their members from all over the country to fight against the opponents of the Morsi government, because the police didn't do the job. This was my feeling there. So, and in this, and the end of those fightings and clashes was always the most powerful was winning, or the one who was running away was losing, and the most aggressive was the winner in the end, because the police was mostly not present. So those group was fighting really to the end, and to the end was fighting till the enemy was dying also. This was a really strange situation this time. On the time of, I'm talking about the time of the Morsi, this Morsi year. Last year in summer, after the army took over the power, the situation for me was changed completely. I got more and more in trouble. Why are you photographing? Are you working for Al Jazeera? This was a question I am faced, even if I'm now working in Cairo. My free, punky style of running around and covering whatever I want to cover was suddenly ended. And it's getting really serious. So the adventure was finished. I have to become professional, or I don't know how to say it. It was really the only relaxed spaces in this time was relaxed spaces in terms of photojournalism. Was the protest camps of the Morsi supporter, Rabat and Al-Nahda. Back outside in the camps, on the street, the situation was changed. I was faced with two new kinds of problems. The first kind was, if I was outside, the kind of collective hate or suspectivity if this is the right word, against me, which is still working on the street. Even if I'm now in Cairo, sometimes I'm feeling that the mood of the people is really turned into the opposite if they see me there running with a camera. Not only the policemen or the members of the Secret Service are trying to stop me. Even civilians ask me why I'm here, for whom are you working. They want to have a look into my backpack, stopping me, want that I show my images. Really different things that I had before in the Morsi time, or even before that. Also in the SCAF time it was easier than now. Yeah, and sometimes getting really dangerous if those civilians are stopping you and asking me, and they are going to, if they are going to gathering in groups, more and more people coming, it suddenly became a mob, people touching you, trying to hold you, then it's really aggressive, and the only thing I can do then is being very fast and running.
This is Backhaus.
Could be, yeah, they are also civilians, so I cannot separate it, but could be, yeah. And the second problem for me are the authorities. The authorities. On the 14th of August, on the same day where the brother of Mohamed was arrested, the attacking of the protest camps of the Morsi supporters. I was just arrived in Cairo on this day to cover these attacks, but I got arrested before I was arriving there. They accused me for a funny mixture of mistakes I did. A gas mask and the bullet defend vest might be illegal now, and so in this consequence, why this is illegal, I was claimed because of smuggling inside Egypt. And also my missing accreditation. It was the first day I was there. I had no possibility to go to the Masbiriu to take it, and I didn't make any photos, but they claim me also for this, so they took me to prison. This was, yeah, I can repeat it, and nothing to compare to the story of Mohamed's brother, but it was, for me personally, was the 24 hours nightmare, the worst nightmare I ever had in my life. I was faced with brutal violence. I saw a trial of a raping of a woman. She was also arrested, and I couldn't help, so because I was also
Handcuffed.
Yeah, handcuffed, and they was treating us like animals. Was really crazy situation. But then the German embassy intervened, and I'm pretty sure that they was coming. That I was coming out only because they was present there in the court. The other prisoners had no embassy as a backup. Even they was not allowed to inform their families. I was speaking with some of them, even Syrian refugees and other people, mostly Egyptian people. They was arrested for weeks, for months, and had no possibility to even have a phone call to the families. So for the families, those people are disappeared. To solve the situation, for me to see the situation in the prison is an evidence of incapacity for the country Egypt. But this is another topic, a topic of human rights, and maybe Sarah is talking about this later.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one. Comparing to the other foreigner, we have the story, or Egyptian journalist. I'm a really happy guy, of course. Look at what Mohamed was telling this cameraman. This cameraman Mike Dean from the Sky News, who was shot only examples. The camera team from the first German television was attacked really hardly with knives and was really seriously injured. Things happen like this now. In my last words, now here, I want to focus a little bit the free speech in Egypt. After the government implemented the new protest law some months ago, adding their aggressive and randomly attacks against protesting Islamistic groups, it was quiet in the streets of Cairo in the last time. But in the last weeks, there are more and more activities. This is what I saw. Again, protests, like careful protests, scared people going back to the streets and really carefully try to reactivate their protest. This is what I see in the last weeks. I just was coming 3 weeks ago from Cairo, so it's very new experience for me. So this new kind of categories, there's two categories I want to say. The first one It's a protesting of the group of the Morsi supporters. They have small hidden marches several times per week. I'm not sure about if they did it also like months ago, but this is what I saw the last weeks. Really small marches, small demonstration, and narrow streets outside of the center where the police is not easily able to attack them. But they do, and also the Baltugea you mentioned is mostly there. Member of the 6th of April movement, they are also coming back slowly. I was speaking to Mohamed Ahmed Yusuf, a leading member of the democratic wing of the 6th of April movement. Here's a photo where he held a press conference in front of the presidential palace, of course illegally. But he did it. We had also, I was also covering a march to there with about 300, 400 supporters of the 6th of April movement or members. And this is 3 weeks ago, and they was demonstrating over there, and they was not disturbed by the police. I saw some policemen running away because they didn't know what's happening. So this was the feeling. Okay. And I asked him, the Mohamed, this guy over there, aren't you scared to being attacked if you're breaking the protest law? No. And he answered, we are not scared, but yes, they can kill us, but they never can kill the idea of a democratic Egypt. And by the way, all those people who are sitting in the government are much more older than us. So who is winning in the end? That's it. Thank you.
Abdullah was arrested under the guise of, and the rhetoric of the war on terror, which is a paradigm that is developed from the United States and used by authoritarian governments when they want to arrest dissents or journalists. They have the intelligence and the courage to report, against violations of freedom. I think Amy Goodman later after lunch will probably go into this more detail, but at this point I wanted to ask, do you think that if a movement developed in the United States to put pressure on the United States to transfer the war on terror into a criminal justice system, to pursue criminals, would that be helpful to Abdullah and the future Abdullahs?
I'm not really sure if this might help. I'm not really sure, but in the case of the journalists, many countries claim to having pressure on the Egyptian authorities. And just a few days ago, Al Jazeera sent emails to this John Kerry and William Hague and several officials in Europe and elsewhere, and asking them to press and to have more pressure on the Egyptian authorities. I don't know if they really did something, because also there were reports that when Nabil Fahmy, the Egyptian foreign minister, met John Kerry 2 weeks ago, he asked him to free Abdullah, I think, and a few other journalists, but we saw nothing happening. Also, the ICJ in Vienna last January, they met with the Egyptian authorities, and they promised them that Abdullah, Peter, Baher, and Fahmy will be released in a day, but on the same day, Peter and Baher and Fahmy were referred to criminal court. So I don't really know what can, having a movement here in the US might help or not, but from what I know, that some people already tried having more pressure on the Egyptian government, but they claim we will do something, but they just lie at the end. They don't do anything for the journalists. And they're happy about this. Even today in the English channel journalists, they still show football videos and videos from Kenya, from Somalia, things that have nothing to do as an evidence from what they are charged of. Peter is accused of being a Muslim Brotherhood, someone Australian, and Mohamed Fahmy, he started work in Egypt, I think, 3 months ago, and he's also accused of being Muslim of a Brotherhood member. And Baher, who was, I think, a producer in Cairo office, and everyone, like, if you're in Egypt, everyone knows Baher, that his connections are good with both sides, like the military and the Muslim Brotherhood. So you can't accuse them that they're now Muslim Brotherhood because they work for a channel that is against your agenda, or they don't refer to what happened in July as a revolution, but they refer to it as a military coup.
Yes.
Just shortly, I want to know what echo have you found in two different groups, the big media in the West and the independent media, independent I mean of the fat wallets, because I think in the West sometimes the media are not subject to prison or this kind of persecution, but some economic pressure. So concerning the situation of their colleagues, what has been the response globally?
That's
Anyone who wants to.
I mean, with regards to our journalists, the Al Jazeera journalists, to be honest, if we're going to be very frank, firstly, there was 2 Al Jazeera journalists who were arrested, Mohamed, who was a cameraman for the live channel, and Abdullah Elshamy. There are 2 Egyptians, they don't have any other nationality. And when it was just them 2, to be honest, there wasn't that world outcry. I'm sorry to say, unfortunately, the racist undertones that exist in our world do go in deep in all institutions. It was only when Peter Greste, a white Australian, was arrested that the outcry did increase. And unfortunately, that's the sad truth of the fact. However, thankfully, many of those mistakes began to be rectified, whether intentionally or not. And the deserved outcry, not only for Peter and Mohamed and Baher, then became to increase, particularly for also Abdullah Elshamy. And I think Abdullah, what makes his case even more, and all of them, obviously, none of them deserve to be in jail for even a minute. But what makes Abdullah's case more significant is he brought the world's attention through his own suffering, not through his nationality, not through the fact that he wasn't a known person. Peter's an award-winning journalist because of just what a good journalist he is and what he's been able to do. And Mohamed Fahmy also had worked for CNN before, and Baher had worked with a Japanese agency. Abdullah brought about the attention through his own suffering, which was what makes his situation more. So from an international audience, now I think there is the deserved outcry. I think there needs to be continued pressure. There's been networks like CNN and the BBC and so forth who have stood admirably in solidarity with us since the other 3 journalists were arrested, and hopefully will continue to do so. There's been a sharing of resources. We use, for example, because obviously Al Jazeera, we don't have any journalists now inside Egypt, to get information from the courtroom, we use the CNN reporter to report. So there has been goodwill gestures from that. In terms of local media in Egypt, I don't mean this as a joke. I do not believe there is anything that you can consider to be journalism in Egypt right now. As far as Egypt is concerned, there's no such thing as credible, balanced, truthful journalism in Egypt, or at least in terms of and they're not. By the way, they're not independent channels. They're called privately owned channels. They're not independent whatsoever because they succumb to the diktats and directives of the military, either directly with having military personnel or personnel from the military intelligence present in the control rooms of these places or the editorial rooms of these places, or by the mere fact that the editor-in-chiefs of these places are on the payroll of the military. They have been not only, in the beginning they would neglect the cases of them, but actually they've been part of this campaign. Yani when you look at, for example, a channel like a Tahrir channel, playing this video with some twisted music as if it was some sort of achievement, military achievement, that they captured the Al Jazeera journalists. When you look at, for example, newspapers coming out and printing false news about Abdullah Elshamy, someone who's essentially on the brink of death. And when you look at these, it's sickening. It is sickening. So unfortunately, that is indicative of the situation there. There is a huge disparity between the reaction of the international media and local media in Egypt. But in the end of the day, the local media in Egypt is part and parcel of the coup. The coup would not have taken place were it not for them. They would not have existed were it not for the coup.
Isn't there an underground journalism using social media, anything like that?
Yes, of course there is. But there are also, their lives are in threat. And you've got people like Wael Abbas and you've got others who do try and do this. For example, you have Rust News Network. Rust News Network is a civilian-based independent journalism venture which started off around about the time of the Arab awakening. It is now has the largest number of following of any Arab site on Facebook, more than 6 million people on it. 19 of its journalists are now squandering in the dungeons of Egypt. Those who managed to survive escaped. Are now set up in other countries because they fear for their lives. They were the ones who were behind the leaks of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and one of them, or several of them, were presented in a military trial. These are young people who, some of them are doctors, engineers. Their primary profession wasn't journalism, but they went out of the way to try and provide that independent kind of citizen journalism. And rather than being rewarded for the innovation, and really it is admirable what they've managed to achieve with such little resources, anywhere else they would have been rewarded, essentially they were locked up.
Close this session and take a break for lunch, and then we will convene again at 2:30 for the third panel of the workshop today. Thank you very much for the very thoughtful and actually very painful information that you imparted today. Thank you.